Is that him? It is! I
Yeah.
was right! Jonathan Majors, it's Kang, baby! I was right! I was right! There he is! Oh, yes! Excellent! Oh, that's fantastic. I was right.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode of Observation Conversations. My name is Reid,
And I'm Jonathan.
and today we are finally going to cover what could possibly be the greatest season finale ever.
Mmm.
We'll decide.
Bold
Um,
words.
Loki just finished.
Yes.
Loki just finished. This is the third kind of Marvel Disney Plus show, and I would even dare to say the best Marvel Disney Plus show that we have seen so far.
Mm.
We just
We'll
finished
talk about
episodes
that, yeah.
5 and 6, and do you wanna give us a quick recap?
Yes, well, this is, this is what we've been building to for the past month and a half. This has been quite a journey, quite a wild ride. We did a full episode on just the first episode when that came out because we were so blown away by it. We did a mid-season review talking about episodes 2, 3, and 4, and now we have episodes 5 and 6, and we've seen where everything has ended up, and we have a lot to cover. So let's move through this as expeditiously as we can. So, picking up from episode 4, we move into episode 5, Journey into Mystery, which picks up right where we left off from the mid-credit scene of episode 4. Um, Loki is met by the four other Lokis that we had seen briefly from episode 4. Um, with classic Loki and boastful Loki and kid Loki and Gator Loki. And they inform him that he asks, is he dead? Is he in hell? And he says, no, you're not in hell, but you will be, because they're all about to be killed by this gigantic smoke monster, Alioth, if they don't move
Goliath.
immediately. Yeah, Alioth, if they don't move immediately. And so, while this is happening, Sylvie is interrogating Judge Renslayer, and Renslayer explains when how it's impossible to remove all matter from prune timelines. And so instead of trying to destroy all of it, it simply transports it to a void at the end of time. And this gigantic smoke monster, Eliath, essentially protects this realm and keeps any stuff from getting back out again. Essentially, the guard dog of a junkyard, effectively. So, Sylvie is having this discussion with Renslayer, and eventually, as Renslayer is consulting with Miss Minutes to gain access to some restricted files about, who's really behind the TVA, she realizes that Renslayer is just stalling for time as she's explaining these various things. Hunters rush into the courtroom. Sylvie takes cover behind the judge's dais, and she shockingly, to the shock of everyone in the room, prunes herself. Um, Back in the void, the Lokis proceed to their hideout, which is a bowling alley, which has been converted into a bunker for Lokis, I suppose, at least for this group of Lokis. The Lokis discuss their respective Nexus events, how they landed themselves in the clutches of the TVA and subsequently in the void, including how the very interesting story of how classic Loki survived being murdered by Thanos. He essentially conjured an incredibly convincing duplicate of himself, a projection of a duplicate of himself, which is what Thanos actually killed. Well, meanwhile, he disguised himself as a piece of floating debris. He escaped to this planet, survived there for a long, long time, and eventually just you know, went a bit stir crazy. He wanted to get off this desolate planet. It was only after he tried to get off that he was captured by the TVA. So, as they're having this conversation, President Loki, so now we have a fifth Loki, and his group arrive, and they ambush our group of Lokis. Alligator Loki bites off President Loki's hand, and a very goofy fight scene occurs between President Loki and his group and our Loki group. Classic Loki conjures up duplicates of the group as a distraction in our group of Lokis escape. Meanwhile, Sylvie has been transported to the void, where she gets a brief glimpse of the castle at the end of time that Eliath is guarding. Just as she's about to be eaten by Eliath, Mobius rescues her in this like jalopy with like this goofy pizza thing on top. Um, and they escape. They're driving past all of these different, kind of monuments throughout history. They pass Stonehenge. They pass the Sphinx with its nose intact. They pass this bridge that looks like this. It looks like the Golden Gate Bridge, but it's not quite like the Golden Gate Bridge. It looks a little bit different, like it's an amalgam of different bridges. Um, and so clearly, these are all artifacts from various timelines that are not quite correct, and the TVA pruned as a result. Um, the Loki team, after escaping from President Loki, they witnessed the USS Eldridge, which was this World War II battleship that was involved in this. It's this older conspiracy, something called the Philadelphia Project, where people believe that a number of ships, including this USS Eldridge, were involved in the secretive Philadelphia experiment or the Philadelphia Project to give battleships essentially invisibility cloaks. So they experimented on this ship to make it invisible, I guess, so that could be spotted by enemy ships and U-boats and things. Of course, that wasn't true, but that's a classic conspiracy theory. So in this series, the USS Eldridge was actually, I guess, successfully turned invisible, which was a violation against the timeline, and so it gets dropped into the void. And Eliath kind of comes up to it, and they're like, the ship is like firing on Eliath, but Eliath just comes in and just completely destroys it, kills everybody. Just giving us a sense of the terrifying power of this monster. Like, this is something that I thought about throughout the episode. We've seen some very angry clouds in the MCU so far. I mean, we've seen the Ether, we've seen Dormammu, we've seen the final Elemental at the end of Spider-Man: Far From Home. But I think it's safe to say Goliath is the angriest cloud of all the angry clouds we've seen so
Yeah.
far in the MCU. That
It's
it's a
it's the angriest, but I would say it's not the most intimidating
mm,
because like all the other ones had like really distinct forms, whereas
mm,
Elias literally just looks like the head of a dragon on like the body of a sheep.
that's true.
It's just
Yeah.
like this big fluffy
But the dragon, I mean, the dragon head is really cool, though. I
terrifying.
must say.
Yeah.
Well, when we first saw that at the beginning of this episode, I was like, "Whoa, this is we're really going there. We're really going for it, and it's awesome." So, Eliath, a very angry cloud. Um, so the Loki team and Sylvie and Mobius, they meet up, they regroup. And they talk for a bit. Eventually, Mobius returns to the TVA, vowing to burn it down. And Loki and Sylvie attempt to enchant Alioth to neutralize it so they can get past it. Um, Classic Loki assists by conjuring this epic illusion of the entirety of Asgard, which distracts Alioth. But eventually, he can't hold it, and so the illusion dissipates, and Classic Loki gets eaten by Alioth. And But Loki and Sylvie are able to successfully enchant Alioth, so Alioth is neutralized. And they get to see for the first time uh, the stronghold at the edge of time, at the end of time, essentially. And that is the end of episode 5. And then from there, we move into episode 6, series finale, for all time, always. Great title, by the way, I must say.
Yeah.
So the episode opens up, and it's a really fascinating and trippy opening because we're getting all of these sound vignettes from different moments throughout the MCU, and not just MCU but also just other
Like human
like
history.
notable, yeah,
Yeah.
like other moments in
It
human
was
history and other
really
recordings.
it was like jarring almost. It was
Mm.
really confusing.
Yeah, it was fantastic. Essentially, the way that they visually represent where we are, I guess, in the scope of time is we move from this, it's like the black hole at the center of the galaxy, and we zoom out and we go into another black hole at the center of another galaxy, and that's where we find the location of, I guess, the sacred timeline, because it's this concentric ring that circles around this like meteor, which has the stronghold on top of it,
Yeah.
and that contains all of time as we know it. Um, it's a little bit confusing, but it'll be explained in greater detail later on in the episode. So, well, it's still confusing by the end of the episode, but
Yeah.
perhaps a little bit less confusing than whatever they were getting at there. Um, so Loki and Sylvie, they approach the stronghold and they go inside, and the first thing that happens is uh, Miss Minutes appears, and I guess it's like a little bit of a
The
jump
jump
scare.
scare.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's it's kind of alarming. Yeah.
That
um,
freaked me out. I was not
yeah,
ready for that.
yeah, I've been seeing everybody talking about that online, and so she just kind of abruptly appears, and essentially she tries to strike a bargain with Sylvie and Loki. She says, "Look, he who remains, the person who lives in this stronghold, is prepared to reinsert you back into the timeline, and he could put you in any favorable position you want. Sylvie, if you want to, go back and before the TVA stole your life, we could do that. Loki, if you want to go back and you want to collect all the Infinity Stones, you want to rule Asgard, do whatever you want, just we can make all of that happen for you. Just so long as you agree to leave in peace and don't come back here and don't try to mess with the sacred timeline." Um, of course, they refuse. They don't take that deal. Um, and Afterwards, Miss Minutes leaves the stronghold and she reappears in the TVA, which shows us that Miss Minutes actually can't be, I guess, in two places at once. At least Miss Minutes Prime. I mean, I think there's
Yeah.
recordings of Miss Minutes, but the actual Miss Minutes entity can't be in two places at once. Um, which would make sense because that calls back to episode 2 when Loki asks, "Well, are you a recording or are you real?" She does a bit of both. I think there's lots of recordings of Miss Minutes, but there's only one main
I actually
Miss
do
Minutes.
I do have some stuff to say about that.
Mm. Yeah,
We'll
yeah,
we'll come back to that because
we're gonna get to all
it's
that.
be interesting.
And Miss Minutes delivers Judge Renslayer a mystery file. We don't quite know what's in it, but we know that whatever Renslayer reads in this mystery file, it inspires her to do something later on, which is quite notable. So, meanwhile, B-15 and other hunters are investigating Renslayer's prior life. Apparently, she was a high school principal at Franklin Delano Roosevelt High School in Fremont, Ohio, just this random school in this random town in Northwest Ohio. I looked it up. It's not far from Toledo. In 2018, and they go to see who she was in her prior life, and she doesn't recognize them. She's just still a regular high school principal. Um, and so, just serving to confirm what we already knew, which was that Renslayer, like every other TVA judge and agent, is just a variant taken from their original timeline. But the question is, by who and why? Well, at least we'll know the answer to one of those things by the end of the episode. And so, the big one. We cut back to Loki and Sylvie. They are moving further into the stronghold, and you hear an elevator sound like the sounds we've heard in TVA come up, and then the doors open, and it is revealed just who He Who Remains is, and it is Jonathan Majors, who we know has been cast as Kang. Um, he doesn't really refer to himself as Kang that often throughout the episode, but
Never, yeah, never by name. He
yeah,
gave titles, and one of them was Conqueror,
right,
but he never like dropped his name Kang specifically.
yeah, yeah. So, but it is Kang. In this case, in his role as He Who Remains, and so essentially the bulk of this episode is just Kang explaining what exactly has been happening, and how all of this works. So Kang reveals that essentially it's been him all along. Instead of there being a council of three timekeepers, really he's the only timekeeper, and he has been in this stronghold scripting everything about the sacred timeline, essentially scripting history. Um, and that's why Loki and Sylvie can't just kill him, because he can always just use his temp pad to move out of the way, despite not despite them not projecting their attacks. He always knows where they're going to be and what they're going to try to do, so he always knows how to move away from it. Um, and so we reach Kang's office overlooking the universe, and he reveals his whole backstory. So, in the 31st century, Kang and his many variants were all at the same time discovering the method for moving across timelines. They invented the time pads, they invented the pruning sticks, they invented everything. They all the technology that we see later used by the TVA, Kang created. And at first, these meetings of himself were very cordial. They were friendly. They were productive. They exchanged, compliments and technologies and all these different things. But eventually, um, many of these Kangs turned out to not be as pleasant and friendly, and these encounters turned hostile, leading to a multiversal war, much like what Miss Minutes was explaining in the welcome video from episode 1. That was actually true, but it wasn't the timekeepers who solved it. It was Kang,
Yeah.
because this Kang, he who remains Kang, created the TVA to keep all of the timelines permanently separate, therefore maintaining order, and ending the war. And so he's explaining this, and Kang, as he who remains, he makes his grand bargain is he wants to make a Willy Wonka-esque offer to Loki and Sylvie. Just like Willy Wonka, he's saying, look, I'm old, I'm tired, I've been doing this for a long time. Frankly, I'm kind of sick of it. I'm ready to be done with it. So here's my deal for you. You can either kill me and, live with the unbelievable chaos that ensues as the multiverses collide again and you spark a new multiversal war, or you could take over in my place. You could become the new controllers of the TVA and the Sacred Timeline, and you're free to do, whatever you want to do. You can go back to TVA and tell them all the truth about the variants. That's fine, but just take over my job and oversee the Sacred Timeline, and yeah, that's it'll pretty much be yours to run. And so, as Kang is making this offer and talking with Loki and Sylvie, Ravonna, she's packing up and she's decided to leave the TVA, because she wants to find freedom, I guess. So, whatever she read in that mystery file, I guess that's where she's going to find freedom. We'll talk about what the contents of that mystery file might be or where she's going.
Yeah.
But she says she's leaving to go find some freedom. Um,
Living in
and
search of free will,
free
which was
will,
like
yes.
major theme of this episode.
Yes, absolutely. And so, meanwhile, back at the Stronghold, he who remains reveals that they have crossed the threshold. After which he cannot foresee what's going to happen in the future, and he has no control. Um, and even at this point, you're starting to see some branching in the sacred timeline outside. Um, So Sylvie wants to kill he who remains Kang. Loki wants to discuss what they should do before she just kills him. And they have a fight, they battle, and eventually Sylvie is able to momentarily disarm Loki. They kiss, but she pushes them through a time door back into the TVA, to get him out of the way. So with Loki back at the TVA and neutralized, Sylvie, she just does what she said she was going to do. She just straight up just impales he who remains, just kills him. And his final words are the very ominous "See you soon." It reminds me a lot of at the end of episode 4 when you had that very ominous laughing from the other two timekeepers after the central one was beheaded.
Yeah.
Because deep down, he who remains, you know, either way, whether they take over his job or if they kill him, he's still getting what he wants in the end. Or at least he's satisfied with the outcome either way. And after this happens, the sacred timeline really starts to branch off, and it splits into many fractures and branches. And the branches are even starting to then overlap with other branches, and it's chaos. Um, And at the very end of the episode, the final scene, Loki, he's running through the TVA. He finds Mobius and B-15 in the archives, and he's trying to essentially explain to them everything that's just happened since he's been in the void. But he eventually realizes this Mobius and B-15 that he's speaking to have no recollection of him whatsoever. Like they're, it's such as if they've never met. And the final shot of Loki season one is we pan over to where the gigantic statues of where the timekeepers formerly were in our TVA, but now there are no timekeepers. It's just Kang, and this time it's not He Who Remains. It's Kang the Conqueror. And that is the end of Loki season one, except for a brief stinger in the mid credits where we reveal that yes, indeed, Loki will be the first MCU Disney Plus show to return for a season two.
And
Um,
thank God for that.
yes, yes, because there is so much more to the story. We always said that with just the sheer number of concepts and plot lines this show introduced, it would be very hard to wrap all of that up within 6 episodes.
Yeah.
And I think it did a very good job sticking the landing with many of those things, but there's just too much. We have to keep this going. So we
Yeah.
will
I,
move.
I would even say like this episode in particular still left. I mean, it purposefully left a lot on the table,
Mhm.
but almost in a way that's like unsatisfying.
Yeah,
I
I
see more.
yeah, I left it satisfied, but definitely wanting to see more. And there's a lot more to see because, of course, the main conflict of Loki, I think is not only was it not resolved here, but I think it's going to be playing out over several more subsequent MCU things, not just season two, but I'm sure the movies as well. So yeah, but still quite a finale, a great finale, I think. Yeah, we're gonna move into our analysis and our wager now. But what would you score the last 2 episodes of Loki?
Ooh. Ooh. That's a tough one. I'd say five. I'd probably give it probably an 8 out of 10.
Mm,
I feel like our encounter with all of the other Loki variants was a little bit short because they
mm,
just kind of showed up. President Loki showed up, and then they started fighting each other. And like it
mm.
was really comedic, but I think it would have been fun to kind of explore more of those variants. But other than that, it was really really cool. And then the finale, I actually have to put it at a 7 out of 10, just
Really?
because I felt like the pacing was pretty slow compared to the previous episodes.
Hmm.
Um, it was largely an exposition dump, but it also was just so gorgeous. It was so beautiful. The set direction was just amazing, and like
Hmm.
um the imagery of like the timeline as a ring, but also like when we're inside the citadel and like the colors of the room just kind of change
Mm.
randomly. Gorgeous. And that was really
Fantastic.
cool. And that God, Jonathan Majors is
Oh, he's.
so,
I'm
I
so
don't know
excited to see
whether to
more of
call
him.
him funny
Mm.
or like weird. He's
He's kind of
very
eccentric.
entertaining.
Yeah.
Yeah, eccentric. That's a good word. Yeah, his portrayal of He Who Remains is definitely not what I expected. Because in the comics, it's like a really old dude,
Mm.
um, and that just got replaced by like this eccentric, I guess, what was a scientist,
Yeah.
and it was just like
Who's a lot
no, but
older than he
it was,
looks.
yeah, 7 out of 10, but with a lot of love because this was
Mm.
this was really good.
Yeah, I'm gonna agree with you on one, and I'm actually gonna really disagree on another. I'm with you on 8 out of 10 for episode five, Journey into Mystery. For me, it's right about in line with what I gave episode four, the Nexus event. Like you said, I think it would have been nice to have been able to spend some more time with these variants and get to know them a bit more. The chemistry within that Loki team was great. So it's too bad we didn't get a chance to spend more time with them. But overall, it was definitely, I think the Lokiest episode of Loki. I mean, it was just so weird and high concept, and we're running from this gigantic smoke monster that eats pruned artifacts from different periods in history, and there's seven different Lokis, and classic Loki conjures up this gigantic recreation of Asgard, and him and Sylvie teaming up, and Mobius bolting around in the void with that little car, that little jalopy he has or whatever it is. I mean, it was just crazy. So, it would have been nice to have spent more time with them. And I think overall, the pacing was a little bit uneven between the action moments and the talking moments. But very strong episode overall, 8 out of 10. I think right about in line with the Nexus event. I think maybe I would give a bit of an edge to episode 4 over episode 5, just in terms of my feeling coming out of watching it, but still strong.
Yeah.
As far as episode 6, honestly, I gotta say, and maybe I'm a little bit biased because the big reveal in episode 6 ultimately confirms something that I said from our previous episode. So maybe I am a little bit biased, but I'm going a lot higher than you. I'm giving episode 6 a 10 out of 10. I
Wow.
think that For All Time Always was a great episode, very much in the style of episode 1. Because just like episode 1, that was also primarily a sitting and talking and explaining episode. But the exposition was so well delivered and so interesting, and, it just opened the door to a whole new aspect of the Marvel universe that we haven't seen before. I never felt like I was, attending a lecture on, the
Yeah.
logic of the universe. It was just entertaining all the way through. I think the reveal was brilliant. Jonathan Majors was great. Like he's just sitting there and for 20 minutes explaining everything. But, he's so, the physicality as he moves around the room
It's
and
like
just the
jumping
way
on
he
the desk
talks.
and like
Yeah, you're
running
always
around the room.
engaged. Yeah, it's fantastic.
And also the just the animation they used with this little like marble that like black and gold marble
Mm,
stuff. Kind of reminiscent
fantastic.
of the Wakandan
Mm,
like sand
yeah.
holograms, but that animation was great seeing that visual.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it was, seeing Miss Minutes be more menacing, that was a lot of fun. The mystery with Renslayer, and of course the big cliffhanger at the end. For me, this was a 10 out of 10 episode. I thought, For All Time Always, was one of the best episodes of MCU TV we've seen yet. Definitely, on par with episodes 1 and 2. So,
Yeah.
yeah, 10 out of 10 for me on episode 6.
And I think it makes me super excited not only for season 2 but just for like the next
Mm,
couple of movies
hmm
like Spider-Man, Doctor Strange, Multiverse of Madness, and then
Yes.
Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania,
Mm,
where we like know for sure we're going to see Kang the Conqueror again.
yeah. And I guarantee
It's gonna
you,
be, I'm so excited to see what they do. Just the fact that they're setting up like another, because Thanos, that was like 10 years in the making.
pretty much, yeah.
And now that was the big bad, and now they're setting up like the next kind of villain for this next arc of the
Mm,
MCU, which is
yeah.
Kang. And I think I'm just so excited to watch that kind of
And I
unfold.
and I will bet you anything, Kang is not just going to be a big bad who appears in a few tentpole things. I think that you're going to see Kang pop up in small ways, in big ways and small ways, in the background of many different projects throughout, the next several, big things we're seeing from MCU on Disney Plus and in the movies. And not in terms of, yes, when it comes to like him being the main villain or a big plot point, you know, maybe that'll factor into Spider-Man or Doctor Strange, and we know we'll see him, as you said, in Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania. But like, keep your eye out, because I really feel like, spotting little ways that Kang may have, been influencing history in the background. I think you could see that in the Eternals, definitely, maybe Shang-Chi, Thor Love and Thunder. I mean, just keep your eye out, because I think
Yeah.
that he's gonna be recurring. I really do, in big ways and small. But yeah, I mean, Jonathan Majors. I mean, he's having so much fun with the role, and you could just tell. And this was, I think, definitely probably the most benevolent version of Kang that we're gonna see. Yeah, I think it's all downhill from He Who Remains. So I'm
Yeah.
definitely excited to see him be more sinister and more villainous.
I
But
get I get
great
Loki, I get
casting.
Joker vibes from him. I
Yeah,
don't know if full dictator Kang the Conqueror will be like that, but we'll just have to wait and see.
yeah, very very Joker-esque. I think that's a good parallel. I would agree with that. Very Joker-esque, and so very excited for him. Great casting. And a great reveal. I mean, I remember back early on in the the first couple of episodes of Loki. People were reaching out to Jonathan Majors, asking him, are you going to are you involved in Loki? Are you going to make some cameo or something? Are you going to show up in the series? And of course, he said what they always say. Oh, I have no idea what you're talking about. I'm
Yeah.
not involved in that. But of course, we've seen this song and dance before, and so of course, of course what was the big reveal at the end of this. But I just want to give him credit, because he played his part to perfection in denying any involvement in Loki, even though of course he was ultimately the man behind the curtain. So good job in trying to fool us, even though of course it didn't work. But
Well,
yes, there we are.
debatable.
Mm,
I think it didn't work on you, but it worked on me.
mm.
But I think we should because our previous Loki recording we did decide on a little wager
Yes, we
about
did.
our predictions.
Mm,
Um, in case you don't remember, we decided we were going to take some masking tape and Sharpie,
hmm
and whoever was the worst predictor would have on their chest, "I am bad at Loki theories," and
hmm
on their forehead, variant
Yep.
for the rest of the episode.
Yep.
Are you ready?
Okay, so Reid, you have gone back, you have looked at what we said,
I've
you have
I've
taken
gone back,
score.
I've tallied up, I have the results in front of me.
Okay, well,
Are you prepared?
I am excited. I know at least one that I got right, but I'm sure that there's stuff that I
Yep.
said that was not. So let's see where we stand.
All right, so here's what I did. Um, for everyone that was right,
Mm,
I give a +1, and for everyone that was wrong, I did a -1.
okay,
But I will give both the sum total, which is just the +1s, and then the curve total, which is the +1s and the -1s.
gotcha.
Um, so you said at the end of, um, I guess it was episode 4,
hmm
B-15 kind of disappears in the elevator. We don't know what happens to her, but you said, she's not going anywhere. She's going to be like disrupting the TVA. She's going to be showing people the truth, showing people about their variants.
hmm
You got that exactly right. That's a +1.
Okay, off to a good start.
Um, I think my favorite prediction of yours, um, just because you got it through kind of a loophole. You said there will be an alternate Mobius.
Mm.
I give you a +1 for that because although he's not like a clone,
Mm.
when the TVA was reset at the end of the episode, it
Oh,
was
oh,
a
that's
new
right.
Mobius who didn't know
Yes.
Loki. There are alternate
Oh.
Mobiuses. That's another
Whew.
plus.
Whew. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, how that one was dangerous. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, that was a good prediction. Um, you said Sylvie and Loki will end up together.
Mm,
They obviously did not
mm,
because, as in typical Loki fashion, she betrayed him.
mm,
So that's a -1. But you did say Kang will be revealed,
mm.
and as we see from Jonathan Majors, he obviously was. So that's a +1. Renslayer will be involved with Kang. We don't know if she will in the future, but from what we've seen, I don't even think she knows who he is.
Yeah, that's kind of inconclusive. Yeah.
Yeah, so I put a -1 for that.
hmm
Um, but Miss Minutes is Kang's kind of right hand, in charge of the TVA.
Yes.
More nefarious purpose. That's a
Mm,
+1.
yes.
So that brings your sum total to 4.
Okay.
and your curve total to 2.
Whew,
So
okay,
2 points
yeah,
to you.
okay, yeah, that's okay. Yeah, I feel good about that. I feel good
Yeah.
about that. So let's hear where you stand.
Yeah. So I said pruning and destroying. It's just moving things
Mm.
to a different point. I thought it was an alternate timeline. It's just like this nebula space at the end of time, but I think it counts because it wasn't just deleting things.
Yeah, and I want to give you even more credit because that wasn't even at the end of episode 4. You said that during
Yeah, that's
episode 1
true.
as well. You
That's
said
true.
that it was moving and not deleting. So yeah, so that's definitely a +1 for you on that.
Yeah, that's a +1. I said the timeline was going to break apart.
Mm,
It did.
yep,
So that's a +1.
in a very big way.
Yeah, I also said Sylvie and Loki will end up together. They
Mm.
didn't. That's a -1. I also said that Sylvie and Loki will cause the Nexus event by them like being together, kind of
Ah,
as we saw could happen on Lamentus.
yeah,
That also did not happen. Their romance did not break the universe. Uh,
yeah.
so that's a -1. And then my most foolish, foolish prediction, not wanting to fall down the Mephisto hole.
Mm,
I said it was probably going to be some kind of new celestial that created the TVA, not Kang the Conqueror.
hmm.
And it was Kang the Conqueror. So that's a -1, bringing my sum total to 2 and my curve total to -1.
Oh boy. Well,
So
I, I,
congratulations.
I want to give you credit because I think your instincts were right in not wanting to, as you said, fall down the Mephisto hole. But well, I mean, I'm not the gloating type, but allow me to gloat a little bit.
No, gloat all you
It
want.
it is become clear that well, it seems I am the Loki theory master. uh, and I'm very proud about that.
I need to write I am bad at Loki theories.
Oh, oh.
See that?
Yep.
That'll go
Yeah, yeah. You probably want to put it up near to your collar so we can see it.
right up there.
Yeah, there you
But it's a little hard to see on camera.
go.
So I will make a better sign for you. Probably the more humiliating one.
Oh, well, what can I
I bet you're
say?
so proud of yourself.
I am. Let me tell you, as you saw from the top of the episode, from my reaction when we were watching this episode, I was thrilled. I was bowled over when we got the reveal that it was Kang as He Who Remains. So, yes, as I said, what could I say? I'm not the gloating type, but yes, I was thrilled to see that my
I am not the gloating
brilliant,
type, he gloats.
exactly, my brilliant propensity for prognostication yielded the correct result. Um, quite frankly, there it is. There he is. There's the variant. There he is. What
He's
can I
so
say, my
impressive.
friend? You should have joined the Kang gang. You should have come
I
aboard.
should have joined the Kang gang, but I didn't want to be part of the Mephisto crew.
That's true.
I didn't want to be wrong.
That's true. And I think a lot of people were burned, understandably, coming off of Mephisto and WandaVision. But in this case, I have been crowned. There it is. There's my crown.
A little
The
horn.
Theory Master. Hey, there you go. I have been crowned the Loki Theory Master, and well, that's just that.
Yeah.
Kang's the man.
So I think what we should do is address these kind of one by one and talk
Hmm.
about what went right or what went wrong.
Yeah, just to do a full series overview, kind of looking back. So where do you want to start?
I mean, let's just start at the top of the list. You had B-15,
Mm,
kind of escaping, disrupting the TVA, showing people that they're variants. I thought we got a really cool scene of that when she literally took him to the high school and showed Renslayer as an actual like teacher
yeah.
at this high school. Um, I don't know. Do you have anything to say about that? Like, how did you
Ah,
feel watching that scene and being like, oh yeah,
yeah. Honestly, it was when I saw that. Um, it I was glad because I got that theory correct. Even though perhaps it wasn't quite in the way I was thinking at the time I made the theory. When I made the theory, I thought it was going to be more like in the vein of like you remember in Captain America: The Winter Soldier. Um, when Cap got on the PA system in Shield and was kind of alerting everybody about Project Insight and how Hydra had
mm,
infiltrated, and he was like, it was like this big moment. I thought it was gonna kind of be like that, where B-15 like was able to like communicate with everyone in the TVA and just like try to expose the whole thing, blow the lid off the whole thing at once. Ultimately, what she ended up doing was a lot
a
more
little more
subtle
like,
than that.
yeah, it was like covert ops almost.
Exactly. Showing key people their prior lives, before they were, brought to the TVA and brainwashed. So, I was glad to see that scene, even though it wasn't quite. It was achieving what I said. I thought it was what was going to happen, but not in the way I thought it was going to happen. But still, it was very interesting to see, who Renslayer was before she was the Renslayer that we know. Just the principal of a random school in a random town in Ohio in 2018.
Yeah.
Which I will say this, it seems like of the locations that we visited, like, going back in time, there has been a certain bias towards more recent events than events that are farther away. Like, yes, we went to France in the 16th century and we went to Pompeii, obviously. But, it feels like when you have all of human history to work with, I feel like just going to a Ren fair in the 80s in Wisconsin or some random town in Ohio in 2018, just 3 years ago. It just
Yeah.
doesn't feel very exotic, Like I feel like, Renslayer could have come from any point in history. It just feels like, she was, and I get that's thematically appropriate because yeah, she was just a random person who got taken by the TVA. It could happen to anyone at any time. But it would have been I do kind of wish it was something a little bit more
Satisfying.
intriguing, yeah, than just a high school principal from 3 years ago. I get that's the point because she's just a random person, but like I feel like we could go more places in the past than just the places we've been.
And also
Um,
more places than just Earth. Like the
mm,
only alien place we went to was Lamentus.
yeah,
But if you think about how large the universe is, how likely is it that like the majority of Nexus events are happening on this one planet?
it's true. Yeah, so and it's true, and that we saw in that TVA board, kind of showing all of the deviations and all the Nexus events after the timeline was bombed at the end of episode two. All of these different locations and different moments in history, both on Earth and on other planets we've seen, and other places that we've seen in the MCU. And so it would have been good to see more of that. But that's even more so to what we were saying in our mid-season review, which is it would have just been good to have seen more of the consequences of the timeline bombing,
Yeah.
in subsequent episodes, but we never really got to see that. Um, but yeah, so that's my one tiny gripe with it. But other than that, it was achieving what I thought was going to happen, just in a different way. So
Yeah.
so that was good.
And I think that's kind of what happened with Mobius as well. It wasn't
Mm.
really in the way that you expected.
Oh yeah, very much not in the way that I was expecting. But it's almost preferable this way than the way I was thinking because if they did it in exactly the same way it works in the comics, that would have been, you know, I don't want to say it would have been predictable because that still would have been a big reveal, but going to an entirely new TVA and potentially an entirely new timeline is I think opens up a lot more doors than staying within the same TVA with the same characters, even if one of those characters has this infinite number of clones or whatever. So I I think that, yeah, so I think it's preferable the way they did it than the way that I was thinking that they might approach it. At least more interesting, and it kind of opens up more opportunities for storytelling in season two and other things. So yeah, I have no ill will towards that at all, and
Yeah, I
I
think
got it right, so that's good.
yeah. I think it just begs some interesting questions because the TVA seemed to be almost outside of time,
Mm,
but the fact that there's now like a new timeline for the TVA
yeah.
is that's a little bit confusing. I think my best guess as to how that works is if the TVA existed like in the quantum realm.
Hmm.
So it still exists like on the main timeline, but just in a way where it's not really directly affected by the passage of time.
Yeah, and that's the thing because it's it's unclear in that little end scene that we get, that short end scene that we get at the end of episode six, what the fate of our TVA that we've come to know this whole time is. Sylvie pushed Loki through the time door, and it seems like what we're seeing at the end of episode six is kind of more in line with Back to the Future 2 rules, because something was changed in the future. Therefore, Kang, because he's this time traveling guy, now that he hasn't been prohibited from the bad Kangs haven't been prohibited from crossing timelines. Now Kang the Conqueror has co-opted the TVA in the past, and so now he's like the guy. And that is the TVA that Loki is now inhabiting. But of course, by the logic that has now been exhaustively tried to be explained to us through Endgame in this show, it's not so much Back to the Future in that time is linear, and you know you affect everything that you affect happens on this line. You can only move backwards and forwards on it. When you change something, it just creates this new reality. And so it seems that it's the end scene of episode six suggests that our TVA has been reset, but by the rules of Loki, this isn't even our TVA. This is a different TVA, and our TVA is
Yeah.
still in another timeline. So it is confusing. It is definitely.
Yeah, I will say the one thing, you were saying like, oh, she kills Kang in the future, so that enables him in the past to like go on and take over. But the thing is like Kang lives in that, citadel at the end of time.
Mm,
But as you can see, it's also like, it sits on this meteor that's like not in the circle
mm,
of the time. Like it doesn't sit on the circle of the timeline. It sits right in
yeah,
the middle. So it's not even like, we talk about the TVA seeming like it's out of time, but that's literally displaced from any moment in time.
yeah.
So it seems that like any actions that happen in that citadel have an instantaneous effect on the entire linear timeline.
Hmm.
Um, so the fact that he is killed almost means that um, other Kangs have always like taken over. They were always there. Like
Right.
it's weird and it's completely non-intuitive.
Yeah, and then
Um,
this gets back to Endgame as well, because this is a gripe that I've long had about Endgame, and I just rewatched Endgame a few days ago actually, and Endgame, for as great as it is, and it's a epic and fantastic conclusion to the Infinity Saga. I think that the Marvel universe, I don't think they did themselves any favors having the time travel logic that they introduced in Endgame. I understand why, because they want to do the multiverse, and that's how you get to a multiverse. But I think that from a storytelling perspective, they could have made it a lot easier for themselves and for everyone else if they had just said that it is Back to the Future rules, and that time is linear, and you know, affecting things in the future, affecting things in the past, alter the future, instead of creating a branch where then you create a new timeline that it deviates from the thing that you changed.
Yeah, I think it's this is why time travel just doesn't exist and can't exist.
Yeah.
It only exists in fiction.
Mm,
I mean, first of all, it's theoretically possible, but you'd need an infinite amount of energy, and we know that the universe has a very finite amount of energy, so
mm,
impossible. But um, when you talk about in fiction, if you do Back to the Future rules, then you run into all sorts of time paradoxes, like how Marty McFly almost prevented his parents from meeting, and that
mm.
would have erased his existence.
Right.
They can kind of avoid that by not using those rules and
Yeah.
instead doing the multi-branch timeline. I think they just could have explained it better in Endgame.
Mm,
Um, because they kind of almost like bullshitted around it by talking about all this quantum stuff, but they literally should have said like, oh, we're taking Infinity Stones from these alternate timelines, um, like literally other parallel timelines. So it's
mm,
it's almost like if you're on a guitar string and then you jump over to another string.
mm.
Take the Infinity Stones from that, jump back to yours, defeat Thanos, um, and then you can go back to that string and put it back if you want.
Right.
Um, but but then because if you do that, then the string next to you, assuming it plays out the same, would also jump to your string and take the Infinity Stones,
Right.
which then can't now be taken. I don't know.
And
I don't
and
know.
and
I think the idea that um messing with the sacred timeline just makes shit super confusing is the best
yeah.
explanation we're ever gonna get.
And here's the other big problem. And I mean, maybe the writers have already given some in-universe explanation for this, but of course, the resolution of the time travel in Endgame is Captain America. He collects all the stones and he goes back in time to return them to their respective places in the timeline, so that those branches are clipped. They never occur because the stones effectively never left.
Yeah.
But of course, there was one very significant element that the Avengers were literally not able to return to its place in the timeline, and that was Thanos himself and his entire army, because Thanos traveled through time, to arrive in 2023, the MCU's modern day, and that which was the big climax of the movie. But Thanos and his whole forces and the Dark Aster, they're all destroyed. So because they've been destroyed in the future, they cannot then be returned to the past to resume their place in the past, which would create a huge branch, which is a Thanos-less branch. So,
But then supposedly that branch would just get clipped by the TVA because it is kind of a Nexus event.
right.
Any branch that isn't playing out as it's supposed to would just get clipped. So it doesn't even matter. So in that instance, the like the idea that they have to return the stones is kind of meaningless too, because we see in the first episode, the guy opens the desk drawer and there's a bunch of Infinity Stones in there, which means those stones weren't returned to their timelines.
Mm.
Those timelines were just clipped.
Oh yeah, and not to mention, of course, the other branch which was created, which is that Steve Rogers, he didn't return back to the prime timeline. He went back to the 40s to live out the rest of his life with Peggy Carter. And the writers have said that that just genuinely did create an alternate timeline. That is just another branch that wasn't clipped. And he then returned back to the prime timeline to give Sam the shield. So that's another thing as well. Presumably, I mean, by what you're saying, the TVA would have clipped that branch too, the Steve and Peggy live together branch. So,
This is exactly what I was afraid of. Um, was that like, the comics just got so convoluted. They've
mm,
restarted the comics so many times.
yeah.
And I was really worried because the MCU is so big that you can't just like rewrite the MCU.
Mm,
Um, I think the decision they made to have Cap come back as an old man, like sitting on the bench, was dumb, and it broke their own rules for time
Mm.
travel that they
Yeah.
established in the same movie. Just have him like come back in the suit, but then he takes off the helmet and he's old.
Right.
And then they're like, what the heck? What happened? You're only supposed to be gone for like, a month or something, or however long it would take to return the stones. And then he was like, well, I decided not to return until I, had lived out the life I wanted.
Right.
Uh, and then that doesn't break the logic. But instead, they had him like not return, but instead he was always alive, was living life with Peggy somewhere in that
Mm.
timeline. It just doesn't make sense. And I think Loki is
But that's the
trying
thing, is that he
to.
wasn't even in the prime timeline. He was in his own timeline and then got back into the time machine as an old man to return to the prime timeline to give Sam the shield.
I don't think he did though, because he would have shown up. That's what he should have done. Because in that, but if he had done that, he would have returned on that kind of quantum pad thing that they sent him off in the first place. It
Mm.
wasn't that he returned, because that's how he would have returned. It was that, he went back in time and then lived out his life, and then as an old man just walked to the park, um, sat on that bench, like
Right.
he didn't go, forgive me, he didn't go back to the future. He he just kind of stayed in the past until the past caught up with the present. But that doesn't make sense because it should have been an alternate,
Yeah, but
like,
then
branch timeline.
but even if you do say that Cap just lived out his life in the prime timeline, then to go back to what you said earlier, the problem is that prime Captain America, he is frozen in ice at the North Pole.
Yeah.
So
So
this
then there's
Captain
just two
America, who's living
caps.
his life, his happy life with Peggy in New York, the TVA is going to show up and prune him because he's a
Yeah,
variant.
it doesn't make
So
sense. Like,
it doesn't
the
work.
Rooster Brothers are great, but like they kind of fucked up their own ending to their
Yeah,
movie,
yeah,
which is just a little upsetting. And also, that kind of speaks to a larger issue where they have to like answer all these questions on Twitter and like, say, oh, this is what happens canonically. And it's like, if you can't explain it in the movie, if
mm,
it's not an interpretation given that the viewer gets from the movie directly, it's just lost. Anything
yeah,
you say outside of the movie doesn't count in my mind. It's like the
yeah,
equivalent of J.K. Rowling like going back and saying, "Oh, Dumbledore was gay." Well, I didn't see that in the movies. I'm not gonna
yeah,
like rewatch the movies and just keep this in the back of the mind that, oh, he's gay the entire time. Like, no, you're retroactively changing the story that was already published as a work of art.
yeah,
It's done. Um, so yeah, it doesn't really make sense. I think there's just kind of a little leap in logic you need to make, and just kind of accept that Loki has its own rules.
mm,
Time travel is always so complicated, though. It's
yeah.
always so messy.
Yeah. Just to your point, like I was saying from the outset, I just, yeah, as you said, I don't think that the MCU did itself any favors with its endgame logic, and we're starting to see the logical conclusion of that, I guess, the logical, illogical conclusion of that by the end of Loki, where it's now just chaos. Everything is splitting off. Um, and so, I know you're continuing down your list, and there's the one I do want to talk about is one of my next predictions. We talked about Kang a bit, but
Mhm.
Miss Minutes and that reveal,
Yes.
because I think that is, and this is why I predicted it. I just the TVA was always too bureaucratic for Kang to be the direct controller of. Like, yeah, he created it, and the TVA is enforcing his vision for the sacred timeline. But sitting behind a desk, even though in episode 6 we literally did see Kang sitting behind a desk, but like doing all the
But he was so
bureaucratic.
bored. You could see
Exactly.
that.
Well,
Like,
that's the thing, is that it's boring. That's not what excites Kang. So he needs a lieutenant. He needs a deputy, who's going to essentially be his enforcer in the TVA to oversee its day-to-day operations. and a trustworthy figure that no one would ever suspect as being this sinister consigliere for the villainous king. And Miss Minutes was perfect for that. So I'm really glad that they went that route with Miss Minutes in episode 6, because frankly they didn't have to. Like, Miss Minutes could just be like the unwitting AI at the
Yeah.
center of the TVA who doesn't know any more than Renslayer or anybody else. But the fact that Kang and Miss Minutes are like in cahoots, and like, just like I said, Miss Minutes is kind of Kang's enforcer, it is really cool because she's this cute anthropomorphic clock with this adorable southern accent, but like deep down, no, she's like this really deeply authoritarian, almost this authoritarian uber time cop, essentially, who's running everything. It's like a big brother figure,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
like in 1984. And I just think that that's great. So
I
I'm
also I,
excited
I just
for
find it
more
funny
evil
that
Miss
Kang
Minutes
was
in
like a
season 2.
I find it funny that Kang was like a 31st century scientist
Mm.
that just had some kind of weird appreciation for 70s animation.
Yeah, but then again, for someone who's been all throughout history, I'm sure maybe he
Yeah.
went back and spent some time in the 60s and got into the Jetsons or something.
Yeah, but I
Which,
think sorry, go ahead.
oh yeah, I was going to say, well, speaking of going back to the 60s, well, we know that the final project of Phase 4, as it's laid out currently, is going to be the Fantastic Four. And we don't know anything about that movie. Maybe it'll come out in 2023, maybe 2024. We just know that that's the projected endpoint of Phase 4 of the MCU. Um, and I would be very surprised if Kang didn't feature prominently in that, because he is one of the Fantastic Four's arch nemesi. I don't know. um,
Nemesis? That's a good
nemesis.
question.
Yeah, but I guess what I'm saying is, kind of coming back to Kang, I think he's going to be popping up a lot throughout these, many of these next several MCU things, both on Disney Plus and in the movies. And frankly, I don't. I mean, no offense to Ant-Man and the Wasp, but I don't see Ant-Man being the reason Kang is defeated. You know.
Yeah, I was that's what I was gonna bring up. It's like they're setting him up to be kind of the next Thanos, the next like overarching villain for this phase of the MCU,
Mhm.
which means Ant-Man has to lose against Kang, or Kang just has to have some kind of small role.
Yeah.
I have no idea what's gonna be up with that. But if he's gonna be popping up over and over, do you think that means he's gonna be like kind of dominating the Avengers for a long time before they finally get the upper hand in like whatever that Avengers
Well,
movie
well,
is?
that's what I'm thinking. Is I think he's going to be outsmarting and thwarting all of our heroes, because right now we don't really have an Avengers lineup as such. Everybody's just kind of scattered to the winds.
Yeah.
So I think he's going to be you know, popping up in the background of lots of these next several movies and series, just like messing with stuff in the background. I think he'll factor into Doctor Strange too, because I mean, how could he not? I mean, Multiverse of Madness, and we just had this massive branching of the timeline at the end of this series. But he's not going to be the main antagonist. He'll probably be the main antagonist of Ant-Man 3, but I don't think he's going to be defeated in Ant-Man 3. I really believe that, if anything, Kang's downfall is going to be either in the next Avengers film in Phase 5, when they do probably Young Avengers. Seems like that's probably the direction they're moving in,
Hmm.
or Fantastic Four. I think is the other likely outcome. Because I mean that would be an Avengers level, threat, and an Avengers level event is both the final showdown with Kang and of course introduction of Marvel's first family. So, and I mean, of course, again, we've got nothing official about Fantastic Four, but there has been speculation that it won't necessarily be set in the present day. I mean, there's, it might be cool if they did a period thing where where we went back and revisited the Fantastic Four in the '60s, around the time when they were first showing up in the comics, and have that be a fun little period piece, like the first Captain America or Captain Marvel. That could be fun. And then obviously, you could have, Kang show up in that. So, no telling what they'll do, but I think that would be really cool, and I hope they do that.
Yeah, but having kind of this multiverse and all these branching timelines just opens up so many different possibilities. Like they can
Yeah,
literally just tell any story they want, set stories at any kind of point in time that they want.
yeah,
The biggest question is just gonna be like, what is canonical, what is not?
mm,
What affects the like MCU Prime, or is it gonna be kind of like a lot of the comics where sometimes there are comics that are just kind of one-off stories that like
yeah.
you can't tell if they exist in the main timeline or not, and it's just kind of whatever.
Yeah, which I mean, people are now, after this episode came out, people have been really asking, well, because we've just seen this massive shattering of the sacred timeline, does that mean that what we're about to see in the animated series What If is canon? Because those could just be windows into various scenarios that are made possible because of the branches of the sacred timeline, where, what if instead of Captain America there was Captain Britain, and what if, instead of becoming Black Panther, T'Challa became Star Lord, and all these different scenarios that we're going to see
Yeah.
in the Marvel zombies and all that other stuff. Is that canon, and that those are just branch timelines created by this conclusion to Loki? I don't know if they've answered that, but now it kind of opens the door. Maybe that stuff is canon. Those are just alternate timelines that are not connected to our sacred timeline, our main timeline.
Yeah, I think what they're gonna do is, because the What If series is also, it's a different medium. It's animation, not film.
Yeah.
I think it's not gonna be canon. It's just kind of exploring these fun stories,
Hmm.
but it is kind of thematically connected to, what has just been established. And that's gonna be kind of the overarching theme of Phase 5, is just kind of exploring alternate realities and timelines and other possibilities, um and just like expanding the MCU, making it go not super far but super wide.
Right.
Yeah, so what if a non-canon, but like suggested canon, I guess,
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
how I would put it.
Yeah. It seems like it's at least within the realm of possibility now. As a result of the conclusion of this season. Um, but yes, this speaks to one of your theories. I'm very glad they didn't do this, because one of the reasons why I felt confident in my theory about Kang, but one of the reasons why I was a little bit concerned, especially by the end of episode 5, was that I was hoping that they wouldn't make the man behind the curtain, he who remains, just another Loki. Because as we've seen, this show has revolved around Loki, essentially interacting with variant versions of himself, from Sylvie to the whole Loki crew that we see in Journey into Mystery. And it would not have been, based on everything we had seen thus far, that crazy to have it be, well, the final villain is just another Loki. Even if it isn't Tom Hiddleston Loki necessarily, it would be another version of Loki.
Yeah.
Um, Maybe even, classic Loki, because I mean, yeah, he seemed to get eaten by Alioth by the end of episode 5, but he explained to us earlier in the episode how he seemed to escape certain death. So we know it's not outside of his, power set. um but I'm glad they didn't do that, because I feel like we have already kind of that just feels so typical to the Marvel formula when it comes to the final villain. In so many Marvel movies, and not all of them, but in so many Marvel movies, the villain is just a dark reflection of the hero. What if Iron Man, but evil? What if Black Panther, but evil?
Yeah.
What if and so on and so forth. We've seen a lot. What if Ant-Man but evil? And there's a lot of that. Um, and even in the other MCU shows that we've gotten so far, you had Agatha Harkness, who is also a
Witch, but
witch. Yeah,
evil.
yeah, but
Super
a witch, but
soldier, but
evil.
evil.
Yeah, exactly. And a witch, not necessarily, not quite in the same way as Scarlet Witch, but close enough.
Yeah,
And in Falcon Winter Soldier, obviously, you had the Falcon becoming Captain America, and for the first 4 episodes or so, the
Captain
antagonist
America,
was,
but evil.
yeah, well, was essentially just like this Captain America, but not even evil, just a jerk, kind of.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, yeah, you have the Flag Smashers too, but whatever.
Yes.
And so I was hoping we wouldn't get, Loki, but like the ultimate version Loki, um, and we didn't get that, thankfully. So
Yeah.
I'm glad they just decided to go the whole hog and say, nope, it's Kang, it's He Who Remains. We're going all the way with it. And they did it beautifully. I mean, it was a fantastic reveal. So well done on that.
Yeah. I think that's definitely been an issue that's plagued Marvel for a long time.
Hmm.
The dark reflection of the hero is such a common trope, and it's kind of the easiest way to make a villain. It's a staple of storytelling at this point, but the best villains that they've had are ones that, don't even seem to be villainous. Like
Mm.
Thanos in Infinity War, the way that movie was structured, Thanos was the protagonist.
Yeah, yeah.
And that was really cool. And he's not a dark reflection of anyone,
Hmm.
of any one character. Um, and I actually, to give credit where credit is due, I feel like these MCU shows are actually doing a much better job of disregarding that formula.
Yeah,
WandaVision, we have Agatha Harkness, who's just, a witch but evil. But, Wanda is also kind of evil.
yeah,
She's like definitely not benevolent.
yeah. The
She's
morality of that show is a little bit,
it's very gray. Like
yeah, it's very gray.
she's the protagonist, but she's doing kind of really terrible things to these people, and it's
Right.
you know, and then with Falcon and the Winter Soldier, it's kind of the same thing a little bit. Not as strong, but it was following John Walker, Riot
Mm,
Russell, like trying to be the best Captain America that he can be.
mm,
And it was exploring like what does it mean to be a hero or what does it mean to be a villain. And they were really, you know, not trying away from this is good, this is bad.
mm.
Because, you know, he was Captain America, but he wasn't really good at it. He ended up being
Yeah,
like very violent, um,
yeah,
a bad hero.
yeah.
um, Carly Morgenthau, labeled a
Mm.
terrorist, but she had a good cause, and she was well intentioned.
She had a good
She just,
cause. We think like
yeah, it
like
wasn't,
we're told that, well, by the end of the Falcon Winter Soldier, well, she wasn't that bad. You politicians, you ought to listen to people like Carly, because she deep down, yeah, she killed a bunch of people, but you should do more. That was what
yeah,
it was. Do
yeah. It
more for
was
the
so it's
downtrodden.
it wasn't as convincing, but it was like she was doing these things. Violence was kind of a means to an end for her. It wasn't like her goal wasn't to be violent. It wasn't to kill people. It was to create systematic change.
Yeah.
She was a radical though. That's just what happens. Um, but also, explored, Falcon not wanting to be Captain America, not wanting to be a hero. Um, Bucky not thinking he can be a hero, thinking he's still a villain.
Yeah.
There aren't any of these like light, dark, yin yang, hero, anti-hero. Um, and I think Loki just took that even further and just didn't really even have a villain. I mean, it's like, it was more of like a mystery thriller of a show rather than
Yeah,
the traditional good guy, bad guy. Um, because we follow Loki and he joins the TVA, and then we think we're gonna see, like, I mean, Loki is a villain. He did kill a bunch of people, but he's also like kind of a hero because we like him.
yeah,
But then they're like, there's this really evil Loki who's like not only killing people but killing like TVA agents.
hmm,
And then, Sylvie ended up being like kind of a good guy.
yeah,
And then it turns out the TVA is bad. But then it turns out, no, they're good. They're just being manipulated by this other guy who is bad. But no,
hmm,
he's not actually bad. He's trying to protect us from a much worse threat.
yeah.
And it's like, it,
Himself.
it keeps it keeps like, here's a villain. Just kidding, they're not a villain. There is no villain.
Hmm.
Which I thought was super interesting. You know, I'm
Yeah,
I'm glad they didn't do the like it's another Loki, because that would have been really boring. And I
yeah.
think um I mean all these MCU shows, but Loki especially has been good about kind of throwing out that typical hero villain formula.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely, and yeah, I mean, it's we've seen it in the MCU in the past where you've had movies that by the end of it they don't truly have villains. You have antagonists and people who oppose the hero, but are they really villains? Like I
Yeah.
think about Ghost and Ant-Man and the Wasp. Like yeah, she's the antagonist, but by the end of the movie, she's actually nice, and we're trying to help her. And so you know, and we've seen that done well. We've seen that done perhaps not as well. Like, I know we dunk on it all the time, but in Captain Marvel, the Skrulls are not actually villainous, and I guess the person who's supposed to be the villain of that movie, Jan Rog, can't do anything against Captain Marvel.
Yeah.
So that's not a movie
That
that really
that that
has a
whole
villain.
movie was a mess.
Yeah,
They
but
they
this
tried to
is
do the M. Night Shyamalan twist and it just did not work.
Yeah, but in this they did it really well, where the it's not that it didn't have a villain, it's that the goalpost kept shifting. As you said in the first two episodes, it was Sylvie, who she's just the variant at that point. But then by episodes 3 and 4, Sylvie's actually nice, and it's kind of the TVA that is this antagonistic force. But by the end of episode 4, the timekeepers are exposed to be frauds, and everyone's just trying to figure out what's going on. And that's when it's the man behind the curtain, he who remains, who is the antagonist. Although not even really, they're just trying to get to him to find out who
Yeah.
he is. And of course, by the time we do see who he is, he's not a bad guy. He's just, he's essentially just trying to get Loki and Sylvie to take his job. He's like, I'm just kind of done with this. I've lived a million lifetimes, and I'm ready to move on. So yeah, very glad they didn't do that. And also, I mean, just a few honorable mentions. First of all, the music of Loki has been outstanding. I think
Oh
I
yeah.
can. I
One
feel.
of the better scores of the MCU, just
Yeah,
because it's so
absolutely.
stylized.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I think definitely it's my favorite music of the Disney Plus shows so far. I mean, WandaVision had some good stuff, and obviously Agatha All Along is one of the songs of the year. But the Loki soundtrack has been so memorable, and it's been fantastic. So I want to give an honorable mention to that. Um, Also, the writer Kate Herron, she did a great job. The direction of each episode has been masterful. And all the environments look so distinct. The actors and just how dynamic they are and how they convey the dialogue is fantastic. So she did a great job. And we did this at the end of WandaVision and Falcon Winter Soldier, where we kind of gave out MVPs. Who's the MVP of the season that just wrapped up? And I mean, it's hard to say because there's so many worthy, so many worthy people who could occupy that title. I gave it to Agatha Harkness, in WandaVision. I gave it to John Walker for Falcon Winter Soldier. Um, and this one, It's tough. Do you have your MVP?
I'm not sure, but I think I know who yours is.
Oh, okay. Well, let's see.
I don't
Um,
think you've come to realize it, but I think your MVP pick is Mobius and Mobius.
Mobius was great. Owen Wilson was fantastic. To be sure, he did a great job. He would be an excellent MVP choice. Um, you know, it's kind of the same thing as Falcon Winter Soldier, because in Falcon Winter Soldier, I wanted to give the MVP to Valentina Allegra de Fontaine, Julia Louis
Yeah.
Dreyfus's character. Um, but we only saw her at the very briefly at the end of one episode. Well, two episodes, but one really main scene with her. So I don't know that I saw enough of her to give her the MVP. And it's the same thing here, where I mean, Kang stole the show in the last episode, but he was only in one episode, and we're going to see a
Yeah.
lot more of him later. So I don't know if I can give him the MVP, though I want to.
What
Um,
what about our special guest for classic Loki?
Yeah, I was about to say classic Loki next. Another scene stealer. I mean, he was just the breakout star of episode 5. He was great. Um, you know, I it's tough. I mean, it could be Mobius, it could be Renslayer, it could be classic Loki. Um, it could be Sylvie. Sylvie was fantastic. Sophia DiMartino did a great job. It could be Kang, He Who Remains, but honestly, I think I have to give it to. I know it's a bit of a cop out, but our title star, Tom Hiddleston, because I mean, he in a single episode, the first episode, he had to convey virtually the entire character growth that we saw play out over a decade of movies, from him being a villainous bad guy to a pretty sympathetic good guy. From the first Thor film to Avengers Infinity War. He had to go on that entire emotional journey in the span of one episode, in episode one. And after that, just watching him solve the mystery of the variant and then watching him kind of come to terms with him falling for Sylvie, kind of falling in love with her, to his banter with Mobius, to, his interactions with the Loki gang in episode 5. Like, Tom Hiddleston just killed it.
He was also President Loki. Like I thought that
Yeah.
was gonna be the
And
same Loki, but no,
he
that was
yeah, I mean, I mean, it was I would find it very difficult to give it to anybody else.
yeah.
Like there's a lot of other people that deserve it and are worthy of it, but Tom Hiddleston is the heart and soul of the show, quite literally, literally and metaphorically. Um, but yeah, I mean, this was his tour de force in terms of his time as Loki, which is saying something because obviously he was fantastic in the first Avengers. He was kind of, the breakout heartthrob of Thor Ragnarok. But this was his finest hour as Loki. He did a fantastic job. So for me, it's Tom Hiddleston as the MVP as Loki.
Yeah. That is I mean you can't go wrong with that pick. For the sake of mixing it up, as much as I love Tom Hiddleston, and God, he was amazing in this, but um my MVP as kind of a larger, kind of emblematic of what she represents, but I have to say Miss Minutes.
Oh,
I have to say Miss Minutes because
Miss Minutes was great.
she's just so fun, but the idea of the propaganda that she represents and just the overall kind of aesthetic that she comes from and that she lives and breathes. I
Mm,
mean, for me, that's really what put the show over the edge, over the other two is just, visually and, the music and just the environments, the set design, the CGI. Like it was such a beautiful and engaging work of art. I'm
mhm,
like, Loki has the coolest title sequence or credit sequence that I've ever seen on any project ever.
yes.
Just and that's pure aesthetic. Um, you know, they do such a good job of like, it's supposed to be this kind of boring bureaucratic theme, but it's also really spooky, but also
And
really
retro.
sci-fi. It's this amazing blend. I
Yeah,
don't know how they pulled it off, but
it's
it just
brilliant.
works so well. Um, and I feel like Miss Minutes kind of really embolizes that, and she's also just really fun. So
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that is a great choice, Miss Minutes. I definitely hear where you're coming from on that. So yeah, I think all that's left to do is what is your ranking? This is the end of our third Disney Plus MCU show. Um, Now I went back and looked at it. You did not give a number score out of 10 for WandaVision Falcon Winter Soldier. But I did. So I know what my rankings are. But where
what
does
were your rankings for those?
so for WandaVision I gave it a 10 out of 10. And for Falcon Winter Soldier I gave it a 7 out of 10.
Mm, mm, okay. Having seen all three, for the interest of being able to rank them, um, I'd either do One Division 9,
Mm,
Falcon the Winter Soldier 8, Loki
mm,
10,
mm,
or One Division 8, uh, Falcon 7, Loki 9.
mm.
Just because, nothing's perfect. It's hard to give it a 10 out of 10, but
Sure.
also like if any show was to be a 10 out of 10, it would be Loki.
Mm.
And it was just such a fun ride from beginning to end. So yeah, I would put Loki at a 10 out of 10.
Okay.
So overall rank is Loki, WandaVision, um, Falcon and the Winter Soldier.
And that was 10-8-7, you said?
Yeah, that'd be like 10-9-8 or
Oh,
like
10,
9.
9, 8. Got it. Got it. Yeah, for me, just to explain my methodology, when I give an episode of a show or a season of a show a 10 out of 10 or a movie 10 out of 10, that's not me saying this movie is perfect and couldn't be improved at all, or this thing is perfect and couldn't be improved at all. My standard for a 10 out of 10 is this will be a season, an episode, a season of television, a movie that I will compare other movies and
Mm,
seasons of a TV show or episodes of TV show against in terms of quality. This is
yeah.
like a benchmark as a 10 out of 10. Um, and that's why I gave WandaVision 10 out of 10 because I mean, it was pitch perfect out of what you would want out of an MCU television show. It was the characters were spot on. The relationship between Wanda and Vision and her kids and the townspeople were all fantastic. The mystery at the center of it was engrossing and like, it was just really involving. The twists were great with, Evan Peters. Is he Fox X-Men Quicksilver? Is he not? Obviously the ultimate villain, even though it wasn't Mephisto, which, a lot of people were disappointed by. Agatha Harkness was great. Like that whole Vision quest she goes on with Wanda in episode 8 was fantastic. So for me, WandaVision became the benchmark as a 10 out of 10 that I would compare other, not just MCU Disney Plus
But
shows, but
just
just yeah,
television.
yeah,
Yeah.
superhero TV in general against, or one of the benchmarks. And so I'm sticking with my scores for the first two. WandaVision 10 out of 10, Falcon Winter Soldier 7 out of 10. And for me, Loki comes in at a very strong 9 out of 10.
Mm,
It was very close to dethroning WandaVision because Loki was excellent, and I have enjoyed taking this ride over the last 6 weeks thoroughly. Um, for me, what gives WandaVision the edge is I think that Loki was perhaps it felt a little more disjointed and the pacing was a little bit more uneven than in WandaVision.
yeah.
Like in
Yeah, I definitely
WandaVision,
agree with that.
you had this continuous conceit of moving forward in the decades each episode. Um, and every episode was kind of working within those aesthetic and thematic constraints of that decade until the big conclusion.
And in terms
Um,
of pacing, WandaVision also had this really nice, it was almost like an exponential acceleration
yeah,
where it starts really slow, but it ends just like really fast, where like the last three episodes are just like stuff is constantly happening.
Exactly.
Whereas Loki
Yeah.
is like, it's kind of jumping all over the place. Like the first two episodes were like really cool. I was like, oh,
Yeah.
this is
So
like
strong out of the
setting up
gate.
a great formula for a TV show. This is so exciting.
Yeah.
And then we spent an entire episode on Lamentus, and it's just like,
Yeah.
okay, all right, that kind of threw me for a loop. But
Yeah.
then we're
Which is
back
a
at the
very
TVA,
slow.
and
Yeah.
there's like this big mystery reveal, and it's like, well, this is so cool. And then we get to the void, and it's like, oh, there's almost all this stuff going on, like all this weird time stuff. And then the last episode is just like they're talking,
Yeah.
having a
Yeah.
chat. But
Yeah, if the momentum of the first two episodes continued throughout all six with, the Loki and Mobius, Men in Black, time cop stuff, culminating in the same place, that would have been a 10 out of 10 series. But as you said, I mean, we came out of the gate really strong, really fast, and then things kind of ground to a halt, momentum wise, with episode three on Lamentus. It was a walking and talking episode, but not an exposition episode, but not as well done as episodes one, or as we would go on to see episode six. But
yeah,
then things ramp up again massively in episode four with the Nexus event, and then it's kind of a lateral move between the Nexus event and Journey into Mystery. But Journey into Mystery is very kind of kooky and weird and kind of goofy. And then we have the big reveal in episode six. So it's a little more it's well, not a little more, it's more disjointed than
yeah,
WandaVision was, because as you said, the intensity of WandaVision increased, the stakes got higher as things got on, the mystery got darker, and things started to kind of the facade kind of began to fall apart. Um, and that was, even though ultimately the ultimate climax of WandaVision was very kind of typical Marvel, let's throw energy blasts at each other climax. It was still
lasers, yeah,
satisfying because we had spent so much time with these characters building up to this point. In Loki, you had six episodes, which on the whole were very good. I mean, my average scores for the Loki episodes that we reviewed is an 8.5. So that's this. So the average episode is great, but the pacing was more disjointed, and ultimately, it simply couldn't pay off everything it set up. There's just so much of this that's going to have to be paid off in future movies, future series, season two of this show. Um, Whereas WandaVision was self-contained. So
yeah,
for that reason, I give WandaVision just the slightest edge, but Loki is a very strong 9 out of 10. Very strong. Um, it was a thoroughly enjoyable watch. And frankly, and this kind of segues into the last thing I wanted to talk about, which is the other three MCU Disney Plus things we're getting at the end of this year are going to have their work cut out for them in terms of living up to what we've gotten so far. Because we know, unless the schedule changes, right now we're slated to get three more MCU things on Disney Plus in 2021. What If, which premieres next month in August, and then Undated, the Hawkeye series, and Miss Marvel. Um, or it could be Miss Marvel and Hawkeye. We don't know what the order is going to be, but the two of
yeah,
them are both supposed to be coming out late this year. And as we know, I mean, these shows aren't going to overlap, so it's going to be one then the other. Um, and just looking forward as to what's coming down the pike for the rest of this year. We have What If, which, as we said, the canonicity of that is unclear. So we'll put that off to one side. But in September, coming up, very soon, we have Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. That's not really going to be a multiverse-centric story. But again, I'm just saying, be prepared, because Kang is going to show up in little ways. He's going to be messing with people. That's all I'm saying. And then if I had to guess, this is based off of just my own speculation, but I think that Miss Marvel and Spider-Man kind of have a similar thing going. They're both teenagers in high school, kind of dealing with how do I balance my superhero life with, my school life, and just like, everyday problems kind of thing. So I tend to, and because we've seen more set photos from Hawkeye than Miss Marvel, I tend to believe that Miss Marvel is going to be late this year, like around the time Spider-Man comes out in like December, November, December.
Yeah.
So if I had to guess, I think we're going to get Hawkeye sooner rather than later. So, and that's not going to be also not going to be a multiverse story, but you know, I really don't know what to expect from Hawkeye. Hawkeye does not have a clear conceit like these first three shows have had. Like WandaVision, Falcon Winter Soldier, and Loki have all had very clear cut kind of concepts behind them. WandaVision with the decades throughout TV history and kind of the celebration of TV history thing. Falcon Winter Soldier with the buddy cop, Fast and Furious thing. Um, with a social conscience, I guess, and Loki with the time travel thing, obviously. But Hawkeye, what's Hawkeye's identity? Like, we
Yeah.
know he's going to be training his daughter, Kate Bishop. And we got a little hint of something. I won't spoil it, but we got a little hint of something that is probably going to come up again in the Hawkeye series from Black Widow, as we kind of thought was going to happen. But, other than that, I don't know what to expect from Hawkeye. And frankly, when they announced it a couple of years ago, I was always like, they're going to have a
Yeah.
hard time with getting me to care
Here's
about that.
so I think Disney Plus, their kind of rollout of shows, there's a balance they needed to strike between starting off strong and um, having shows that will fit the average pace of what
Mm,
these Disney Plus shows will actually be like.
mm,
And I think they leaned a little bit too much towards starting off strong.
mm,
Um, one of the things that I feel is that these shows were a little bit too narrative heavy.
mm.
They didn't really feel like television. They felt like long movies cut up into smaller pieces.
Yeah.
And a lot of shows are like that. But I think, what could make these shows really special is giving us something that the MCU movies can't, which is, a more episodic, one-off adventure thing. And that I was really hoping Loki would actually be like that. Where each episode is that they're, investigating a new kind of mystery in this time period,
Mm,
in this new place. I think that could have been really fun. I think that would have helped Loki a lot, especially in pacing, as
mm,
if it was just a lot longer, had a lot
mm.
more episodes.
Agreed. Yeah.
Um,
More Loki and Mobius adventures would have been welcome.
yeah, I think that would have been really cool. WandaVision, I don't think they could have done that. WandaVision was, very well planned out.
Yeah.
Um, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, that kind of had to be a narrative story. But
Mm,
I think if they had made Loki this kind of more episodic, like traditional TV show feeling show, and they just kind of spread out the mystery and reveals of the TVA over a longer period, having that more kind of lighthearted, relaxed feel for watching it would have helped set the stage for shows like Hawkeye and Miss Marvel that are
mm.
also going to be a lot more kind of lighthearted. I
Yeah.
assume. I assume because I have no idea how they'd make it as narrative heavy as the shows we've gotten already.
Yeah.
It's they're gonna have to do some kind of like light casual television, and I think that is a good thing. Um, I think they just should have set that up better.
Yeah, and I want to really agree with what you just said because that's a big part of the reason why Loki didn't get the 10 out of 10 from me is that just as you said, you know, I would have loved to have seen, as you said, Loki to have some more breathing room, especially in the first half. Even if it meant having shorter episodes, like more so in the WandaVision half an hour episodes, you know,
I would have
it would
been
have
really
been
happy with that.
say again?
I would have been really happy with that
Yeah, just
if it just like
more.
extended the story and
Exactly, yeah, more Loki and Mobius adventures, kind of building up the mystery like they did in WandaVision, because we only got one episode really of Loki and Mobius doing their Men in Black thing together before the show just like, went off on, the main tangent towards the conclusion pretty much.
yeah.
And that's too bad because the central conceit of the show is so strong. Tom Hiddleston and Owen Wilson's charisma and their chemistry together. I wanted to see a lot more of that, and that's, I think, a big missed opportunity. So, yeah, I wanted to echo what you just said because I really agree with that, and that's why it's a 9 out of 10, not 10 out of 10.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, Hawkeye. The only thing that I can really say about Hawkeye is that they set up something interesting that is probably going to play out in the Hawkeye series from Black Widow,
No
but we don't know
spoilers.
what form that'll take. Yeah, no spoilers, but I think that's general enough to say. Um, and but beyond that, I mean, just seeing more of Hawkeye when he was Ronin from Endgame, like that'd be cool because
Yeah.
he was just going around just murdering all of these people.
Taking out
Um,
Yakuza bosses and
yeah, like that was great. Like I'd like to see more of that, but like him training his daughter to be the next Hawkeye, it's like, oh, okay,
sure.
sure,
All
that's
right.
fine. But I mean,
Like Young Avengers, sure. Like
yeah, but where's the hook of
yeah.
WandaVision and Loki and these different shows? So we'll see. But then moving forward, we have Eternals in November, which that is it's impossible to say how that's going to relate to anything else that's happening in the MCU.
I don't think it's going
Um,
to. I
yeah, I
think
think
it's
it's
just
I think the connections are going to be very limited. But again, now that Kang is in the mix, the Eternals is going to be this wide, sweeping view of history on Earth. Our MCU version of Earth. Kang might change something in the background. That's all I'm saying. But other
yeah.
than that, the Eternals is, I think, very much going to be its own thing. Um, and then again, if I had to guess, I would say probably Miss Marvel starts around late November, December. And I am looking forward to Miss Marvel. I mean, I think that show could be interesting because it does have that like Spider-Man thing, and Miss Marvel's is a fun character. So I think that could be fun. And at least the hook of that is pretty clear. Um, the more ground level neighborhood hero type thing. That's fun.
Yeah.
Um, and but yeah, we wrap up the year with obviously the big Kahuna, Spider-Man No Way Home, and that's gonna be. We still haven't got a trailer from it, which is really surprising.
Not even
We're
a teaser.
mid-July now,
Not
and
even a
yeah,
teaser.
nothing. And
All we have
I
is a title.
yeah, and people have been speculating on Twitter and elsewhere. Maybe just like how Sony kind of had to wait for Endgame to come out to put out their full trailer for Spider-Man Far From Home because obviously if they put it out before, people would be able to see the giant mural of Iron Man. People would figure out that he probably dies. So they
Yeah.
had to wait for that, and so people were speculating that maybe in a similar situation, Disney has been telling Sony to hold off on putting out stuff for No Way Home because maybe part of the logic of how we're getting alternate universe, obviously Dr. Octopus and Electro from prior Sony films, is because they needed the logic to be established in this series and Loki. And so that, therefore, now that Loki's finished, a release could be imminent. We will see, you know. But we're getting to a point now where I mean the movie is coming out in 5 months, and usually these things are advertising at least 6 months out. So
Yeah. Should be any
it's
day now.
yeah, I think we're due for it, but that's going to be kind of a capstone I think for the year, because quite frankly, like outside of the Avengers as a unit, I don't think there's any Marvel character in any medium that's more popular than Spider-Man. So,
Yeah.
yeah, so that's going to be great. And that definitely is looking like it's going to be a multiverse story because again, you have Dr. Octopus coming in from the Raimi films and
I'm
Electro
just
coming in
I'm
from
just wondering how that's gonna work.
well, we just saw
Considering
it.
that like they established the multiverse as not even like a multiverse, but as like branched timelines,
Yeah.
which means they should all stem from the MCU timeline, which obviously Raimi Spider-Man and Andrew
Mm,
Maguire Spider-Man don't.
yeah.
But we'll see. It's Marvel. They're gonna do a good job.
Yeah.
I'm skeptical, but once we get that trailer, I'm sure I'm gonna be like, holy shit. So
Yeah, and so we will see, but yeah, what's your take on just what we might be seeing coming down the pike from the Marvel and Disney Plus after this?
For Disney Plus, I don't know. What If's gonna be fun, just because it's gonna be kind of fun stories, very lighthearted.
Hmm.
Hawkeye, I don't really have much interest in. Miss Marvel is a little bit more interesting. I'm wondering because Miss Marvel follows I forget her name, but it's like this kind of Muslim teenager who's gets these powers, and I think she picks the name because she really looks up to
Oh,
Captain Marvel.
the character Kamala
Yeah,
Khan. Yeah,
yeah, yes. But she picks the name because she sees Captain Marvel as like this role model, right?
yeah,
She's
yeah.
a big fan of Carol Danvers. I wonder if Brie Larson is going to make an appearance in that show or not.
You
Um,
know,
and whether why they're releasing it now if they had the opportunity to even connect it to Captain Marvel 2,
yeah, the
whenever
Marvels.
that might be. I don't know. We'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, and that's a good point because honestly, I would be surprised if
Captain
she
Marvel could use all
didn't
the help it can
because
get.
well, because I mean, we know that the Marvels, Captain Marvel 2 is coming out late next year, so they're gonna start setting that up. So I
Yeah.
frankly think, yeah, we probably will see Brie Larson. If we can get Kang in this, we can probably see Brie Larson in some capacity in Miss Marvel.
Yeah,
So,
but for the MCU overall, just having Kang, having that next phase, that new Thanos,
mm,
it makes me really hopeful. So many people said like, "Oh, the MCU is gonna die after Endgame." That's the end of an era,
yeah,
and I don't think that's true at all.
yeah, yeah. Anybody who says that hasn't been paying attention.
Yeah, the momentum is coming back.
Yeah,
Uh, yeah, that's it. I'm excited to see more
yeah.
Nothing Mares, more Kang.
There you go. Absolutely. And I guess with that, our our own journey into mystery, watching Loki these past 6 weeks is concluded.
Yeah,
It's been a hell of a journey. I mean, I think Loki really has proven itself to be the show of the summer. I don't think any show is gonna surpass it in the memories of the general streaming audience in the world, I guess. In terms of just what they were watching, this summer, it really feels like a true event television, true appointment television when the episodes came out on Wednesdays, even more so than WandaVision and Falcon Winter Soldier. Like you had to watch Loki when it came out on Wednesdays if you didn't want to be have spoilers all over social media
yeah,
the next several days. Like you just had to be in the club. And I just think it's so ironic that everyone said that streaming services and streaming shows would be the death of appointment television. Like you wouldn't have these big cable shows anymore, like The Sopranos or what have you, where like everybody watches it on Sunday and you're all talking about it on the water cooler on Monday, or Game of Thrones even. But no, actually, really, streaming is just the successor to that because you have shows like Loki where, you know, everybody is and also it helps because they're not released all at once like on Netflix. Like Netflix, they put the whole season out at once, and so you have to like do this dance of like, oh well, what do you think about episode 5? Oh well, I'm only up through episode 3. Okay, well I guess
yeah,
let's talk again when you get up to where I am, but by then I'll probably have finished the season, and you have to like do this weird thing. But when it releases week by week, even if it is on streaming and it's a show of this magnitude, I mean, it really is like appointment television again, So, and I think in this case, it's been really good for Disney Plus, and it's been really cool to follow. So, Loki was a triumph. I think it fulfilled its glorious purpose.
I
And
agree.
yeah, we will have to see where the fallout of the events of the season land because it does change everything.
Does change everything. I'm just a little sad because I just had the realization that I need to find something new to watch.
I know, I
It
know.
didn't register with me because I was like I finished the episode. And I was like, okay, yeah, I can't wait to talk about this for our
Yeah.
episode. Now that we're done talking about it, it's just like, well, what now?
Yeah, well, I will say, even though Loki is now concluded, our summer continues, and we have
Yeah.
lots more exciting stuff that we're looking forward to talking about before the season is out. So stay tuned for that. And thank you for joining us on this journey, this 3 episode journey of watching Loki. We're so glad that you stuck with us through everything. Um, and yes, by the conclusion of this recording, we will prune the variant so that he will no longer be able to disrupt the sacred timeline before our next episode.
All right. Thank you for watching, everybody.
I would save that. I would save that tapes because you're going to need it again for I am bad at Hawkeye theories in a couple months.
I'm not one to gloat, he says.
What can I say?
Ah! Oh, good night,
It-
everybody.
See you, everybody.